Hey, hi, how are you? My name's Svelte. I'm talking about tanks and tanking in Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers patch 5.31. I'm putting the patch out there so we know exactly when I made this video, and that if tank changes come in the future, they weren't in this video, for obvious reasons. I kind of have a script, but I'm mostly just wilding, just kind of going through what I wanted to talk about. So this will be a little informal, and it'll be a little weird. And there'll be a lot of mistakes in terms of it's not a scripted video, it's a lot more casual than that. I'm going to be talking about each of the four tanks and what I like and dislike about each of them, comparing and contrasting rotations, cooldowns, and all that type of stuff. I recently hit all my tanks to 80. I have taken them all through the current tier extreme trial, and so I can firmly say I've at least done some form of in-game content on them. Keep in mind, this is mostly an opinion piece. Meaning that, don't take this for gospel. This is how I feel about most of these tanks, and how I think about them. Not, oh, there's obviously a best tank out there right now. It's really not. They're all just kind of personal preferences. So, let's get started. First, we're going to be talking about the Paladin. Paladin is the quintessential sword and board tank. You can get it at level 1. It's one of the first two tanks in the game that you can get your hands on. And it's got a pretty interesting set of cooldowns. It has Hollowed Ground, one of the best invulnerabilities in the game, which is 10 seconds of just I don't take damage, which is really nice. It's also got Sheltron as its personal cooldown, but that's built off Oath Gauge, so it's a little bit funky. I'm also going through these with the idea that you at least have a general understanding of tanks, and that I don't need to be going into hardcore details. If you want that, I'm probably going to be uploading the 40-minute edition of this that I did earlier today. I just couldn't stop talking. We'll see about that, though. The biggest personal cooldown is Sheltron, but they don't really have much else, because Intervention and Cover, the two other things that use their Oath Gauge, are only for allies, not for themselves. So they're kind of lacking on the personal cooldown department, but it's not bad. They make up for it with stuff like Passage of Arms and Divine Veil, both of which are very, very powerful team utility spells. Or, is that a spell? Apologies, they're actually abilities, not spells. But Paladin does have spells, and we're going to get to that right now. First, Paladin has basically two full rotations that they use during their full minute cycle. They have their physical rotation involving Goring Blade, Royal Authority, and Atonement, and then they have their magical rotation involving Requiescat, Holy Spirits, and Confiteor. Now, you obviously have your GCD spirits within Encircle of Scorn and Intervene, all of which you're kind of weaving in to these rotations whenever they're off cooldown. But the basic one is you got physical damage, and then you got magical damage, and you rotate between the two of them. It's very straightforward, it's very easy to learn, very basic IMO, and I like it for that. It makes it very easy to take it into a fight and just be like, I know I can do my rotation properly, even if I can't. Always get off Requiescat perfectly in time. They're very powerful off-tank. Main tanking, like I said, they lack personal cooldowns that some of the other ones do, and stuff like Intervention makes them really feel suited to an off-tank. They're also kind of unique in that they have Clemency, which is a self-heal. You typically don't want to use it because, as you can tell, it has a cast time when it's not under Requiescat. And, like, really, you should just be doing damage to end the fight faster. I would really only use it in panic moments when you think you're about to wipe because of losing a tank or something. But if the tank doesn't die, you could pull through. Then it's got a chance. That's the basics of Paladin. They're pretty straightforward. Basic rotation. Kind of odd personal cooldowns and kind of lacking, in my opinion, compared to the next tank we're going to talk about, the Warrior. Warrior is the other tank you can pick up at level 1, and it is a stand in front of boss, hit hard, the tank. It has its basic 1, 2, 3, one that heals, one that gives you a damage buff, all of which are building your Beast Gauge. Beast Gauge is used for stuff like Upheaval, which is just pure damage, Onslaught, which is your dash. Not a huge fan of Onslaught using Beast Gauge, but well, that's not really important. And Felcleave for that big ol' damage. Now, you can also pop Inner Release to make anything that uses Beast Gauge free for the duration and make it always direct crit hit. Now, this does cause a problem for Warrior in their melding situation. Now, melding is attaching materia to stuff, and most tanks will meld heavily for direct hit. Except Warrior. Direct hits do not scale damage-wise with the direct hit stat. It's the frequency that scales. So if you're getting free ones with Inner Release, and by the way, you also get free ones through Inner Chaos, which you get from popping Infuriate. Just a side note. But because those are free, you don't want to meld for it. You don't want to up the chance of something that you're already getting guaranteed when, since they're also guaranteed crits, you can instead meld for crit. And crit increases the damage of a critical hit as well as the frequency of it. So they're kind of in a weird spot for melding because of that. And that's kind of why I always view them with a little bit of an asterisk. If you're gonna go warrior, you kind of gotta commit to get the most out of it. You can use a warrior with suboptimal melds, you just know you won't be doing as much damage, basically. Like, just plain and simple, you won't. Not as much as a warrior who full melded for crit, you know? Personal cooldowns. Raw Intuition is great. 25 seconds, 20% cooldown, wonderful. Nascent Flash shares a cooldown with Raw Intuition and a recast timer, and it heals you upon hitting enemies, which is pretty heckin' powerful. But since it only lasts for 6 seconds, it's kind of hard to use it during, like, trials and raids. So it's better for mobbing and dungeons. They also have Thrill of the Battle, which boosts your HP by a heck of a lot. Up to 187k for me, and I only have 150k base. It's 20%. And Equilibrium for a self-heal. They also have Utility with Shake It Off, giving everybody a shield for a percentage of the warrior's health, which is really powerful, as I'm sure you can imagine. Now, they also have Holmgang. Shortest invuln cooldown, prevents you from dying, but that's all it does. You cannot die, but it's 8 seconds of I can't die, but you're not staying at full health. You're going down to 1. So while it's really powerful for eating tank busters, because you can do it on a 240-second cooldown, you can get in 2 Holmgangs per hallowed ground, basically. Isn't that exactly how it works out? Not exactly. It's like a Holmgang and a half per hallowed ground, but still. You can get in a second Holmgang before a hallowed ground comes off cooldown, which just makes it really powerful. And it's why I view Warrior as a great main tank. Because if nothing else, they can keep popping Holmgang at a far more frequent thing. Frequent rate? Yeah, that sounds right. Like I said, you can tell this is just kind of off the cuff. I have talking points, but I'm going through it. And I'm trying to be kind of quick because, like I said, my uncut is 40 minutes. I was going to try and fit this in under 15 if I could. Dark Knight, the edgiest of boys. Let's start with cooldowns. Classic. In case you don't know why I'm not focusing on the 120-second cooldown abilities, they're basically the same for all of them. The only one that's unique is Warrior's Vengeance, and that just delivers attack back. You hit the enemy back with Vengeance every time it comes up. It's 55 potency, though. It's not enough to be worth a mention outside of mob pulls. Paladins, Warriors, Dark Knights, Gunbreakers. All pretty similar. Same duration, same reduction, same recast timer. Not really worth a great talking point. What is worth a great talking point, though, is TBN, the Blackest Night. One of the dumbest cooldowns that they've ever put in the game. Give me 1 second to take a drink of water. So as long as you have 3k mana, every 15 seconds you can pop a shield for 25% of your max HP. It's really, really strong in progression rating situations and any time when tank busters will hit you for more than half your health. As you get geared up, it gets harder to break, so it's not as powerful, but it's still really powerful. Felt, why do you want it to break? Well, that's where I'm going. When it breaks, it gives you Dark Arts. And Dark Arts gives you a free Edge of Shadow or Flood of Shadow. Those are OGCD abilities that cost mana, typically. But you have to use the mana for the Blackest Night to eat the Tank Buster. So basically, it means that the Blackest Night becomes free to use. Because otherwise, that 3k mana would have been down and dusted, and you wouldn't have been able to use it for the DPS for Edge of Shadow. Now, Dark Knight's also got a gauge, kind of like Warrior, but it's not used for fell cleaving. It's used for Living Shadow, summoning a simulacrum of yourself, which is really cool, and spamming Blood Spiller, which is like fell cleave but different. And unlike in a release, you just have Delirium, which is just, I pop it, they're free. That's it. You also have Quietus, which is similar to one of Warrior's AoE abilities. I was just showing off that it was free. But since Dark Knight is so mana dependent, it makes it kind of interesting. That's why you have Blood Weapon to restore MP. But I'm not done with defensive cooldowns. Gah, I'm jumping back and forth like crazy. Dark Mind. It's different because it's against magic attacks, so magic dealing bosses, Dark Knight's great. Dark Missionary is raid-wide magic protection, which is good because a lot of raid-wide attacks deal magic damage, which is sick. Now, offensive styles, it's really just you spam your 1, 2, 3, you get MP, you use Edge of Shadow. If you're not using TBN, that is. It builds Gauge, you use Gauge to spam Blood Spiller, and then you have your OGCDs every 60 seconds. You enter a burst window where you're using Blood Weapon to get more Edge of Shadows and Blood Spillers, and then you're weaving in Abyssal Drains and Carven Spits and Salted Earths whenever you can, which makes it a little bit busy during its burst windows. I still think it's a great main tank, but that's something to keep in mind in the back of your head. It is kind of busy during bursties. Bursties? Burst windows. Goodness, bursties sounds weird, and let's never make that be a thing. But it's got that going for it. Kind of finger dancing during burst windows, but it's really powerful in its own right, and it's really great as a main tank because of Blackest Night and Dark Mind. It's invuln though. Kid. It makes me so sad. So it's the same as Home Gang in that you can't drop below 1 HP. But here's the thing. If you do hit that 1 HP mark, aka you got an attack that would kill you, basically, and you activate it, you then enter Walking Dead, which is, you know, the true you can't die state. But if you don't get healed to full within the 10-second window, you're literally dead. You will die, which makes it not great, especially in squads that prefer Scholar and Astro as opposed to a White Mage. White Mage can very easily just, bam, Benediction, you're full health, Walking Dead's gone, don't worry about it, buddy. Whereas Scholar and Astro have to kind of work at it. They don't just get to pop a button and instantly full heal your tank. It's why I don't like it for that. But if you know that you're going to be using it for certain mechanics, you can have your White Mage save Benediction for that mechanic. Or just warn them ahead of time and be like, hey, Living Dead's getting used, you're going to have to heal me to full. And that's the Dark Knight. Last, but certainly not least, the newest tank, Gunbreaker. Gunbreaker's cooldowns. Nebula, ignore. Same as all the other 120-second cooldowns. Camouflage, 90-second cooldown for a parry rate increase, and 10% damage reduction, so kinda weak. Then there's Heart of Stone. It's 25-second cooldown, but it's only 15% as opposed to like 20% like the others. So once again, kinda weak. Heart of Light is basically Dark Missionary, but flavored for Gunbreaker. See? But it also has Aurora, which is a slow regen on yourself for 200 potency per tick, which is pretty powerful. Especially when you consider that Brutal Shell also heals you and gives you a shield for portions of your own HP. Now, Gunbreaker is by far the busiest job of the three of them, because your Gnashing Fang combo uses Continuation, and Blasting Zone, and Bow Shock, and Rough Divide all during it, because you put that in your No Mercy window, which is your damage buff. During all of this, you're constantly double weaving with Gnashing Fang Continuation, and you have to be very careful to not overwrite yourself, not get too many cartridges, and still get through all your abilities fitting 9 GCDs inside your No Mercy window. It is a lot. Water break. But yeah, that's Gunbreaker. Very busy. Lots of damage, though. On average, Gunbreakers will deal more damage than the other tanks. But it's time to talk about Gunbreakers shooting themselves in the head thing. They are not literally doing that. Shooting themselves in the foot, maybe? Either way, Super Blide. You pop it, 1 HP. Just instantly down to 1 HP. But you're invuln for 8 seconds. Now you can click it off, but I don't recommend you do that. Kind of a bad idea. But it's honestly a really good cooldown. Like, people will meme on it because something that can happen is you can push it to start going invuln right as your healer drops a big cooldown to try and heal you to full. And so they waste their cooldown because it goes off after you go to 1 HP. Or, correction, it doesn't go off after you go to 1 HP. It goes off before you go down. So they'll benediction to you to full, and then you'll pop it and you'll be at 1 and be like, oh, there goes all their big healing. It's really unfortunate when it happens. Do not do that. But because you can get healed while you're immune, it's different than the other ones. It's closer to a Paladin's than a Warrior's or a Dark Knight's. Whereas Warrior and Dark Knight, you can constantly take damage during it. You just can't die. Paladins and Gunbreakers is, I go down to 1 HP. Or, Gunbreakers is I go down to 1 HP. Paladins I just don't take damage. But regardless, you hit an HP number, but then you don't ever drop below that. You physically cannot because you are impervious. As opposed to being unable to die. Which is why I like it as a tank cooldown a lot. Now, their cooldowns are kind of lacking, honestly. Heart of Stone only being 15% compared to the 25% of Blackest Night? Yeah, 25% of Blackest Night. And then the 20% of Raw Intuition. So, like, Heart of Stone doesn't have the same hit as them. And Camouflage is nice, but not super strong. And personally, I'll always, if a really powerful tank buster is coming in and I don't have Nebula or Rampart, I'll pair Camouflage with Heart of Stone. Just to try and, like, get lucky with a parry and stack the damage reductions as best I can. So that's all of them. That's all 4 tanks, and I've generally talked about their kits. This is already a 17-minute video. Let's try and wrap it up in the next 3. So, I'm going to rank them. I'm going to say my personal favorites in order of my personal favorites. And first is the job I'm already on, Gunbreaker. Gunbreaker is my favorite tank by a large amount. They just feel good, they're visceral, they're busy, they feel like a DPS, but you're in charge of the boss. It's great. I don't like their cooldowns very much, but that doesn't stop me from enjoying them as a tank. Second favorite tank, you got an asterisk, buddy. Warrior would be my second favorite tank if I didn't have to meld them differently. The fact that I would either have to get an entirely new set of armor, or only play Warrior to meld them properly makes me sad. I can use them with improper melds, it just won't be as good. After Warrior is Dark Knight. Now that might actually be a surprise to most people. Most people would think I would put Dark Knight as my second favorite tank, considering how much I rant and rave about TBN. But it's mostly just a matter of, well, I like TBN a lot. It's also kind of hard to keep up with, because you want to be spamming Edge of Shadow for maximum damage, but you also want to keep 3k mana stored for Blackest Night. So it's just kind of a dance of, how do I get out the most damage without forgetting to have mana to pop TBN? And that's just one of the reasons I don't like it. I hate Living Dead. I hate it so much. It's my least favorite tank invuln. And least favorite, everyone knows it, it's Paladin. It's a little boring for me. It's great rotation-wise, but it's a little boring to me. So, you know the order that I like them in. Now let me place them in order of how difficult I think each one of them is to bring into fights blindly. Back to Gunbreaker, probably the hardest. Optimizing for Gunbreaker is a big thing. There's a reason that most people don't bring Gunbreakers to progression parties. They typically will only bring them after they have figured it out and are farming and trying to optimize strats and get as much damage out as possible, because that's what they're good at. They bring damage. They don't bring great cooldowns. Now, what I think is the second most difficult to play is probably Dark Knight, and this might be a little controversial, so people are like, but TBN! Yeah, but every 60 seconds you hit a burst window that's really busy with Blood Weapon. Because every 60 seconds, Blood Weapon, Abyssal Drain, and Carven Spit are all up, so you're just kind of going to town, almost like a Gunbreaker does. So while they have a great stat thing with TBN, I do think they are a little more difficult to optimize into fights because they kind of share that Gunbreaker burst window. Now, after Dark Knight in terms of difficulty, I suppose. Paladin. It's probably one of the easiest tanks to bring into fights blind. The only really difficult thing to worry about is timing your magic phase properly, and that's not even super difficult, as it's make sure you can melee the boss every 60 seconds. That's it. It's a pretty easy job to bring in, pretty straightforward. It's a very easy to learn job too, for most things, and it has great team assists with Passage of Arms, Hollowed, Intervention, all that. And probably the easiest to bring into fights is Warrior, in my opinion, just because Warrior doesn't even have a lot of weaving, and it's very easy to have them drag bosses places. They have a great invuln in Holmgang, being that it's up so often. And ffxiv go Burr. And now I know each of these has different troubles with optimization for fights. This is just my personal opinion on which ones I think would be the easiest to bring in blind. Warrior is great, would be great to bring in blind to stuff just because Holmgang, Thrill of the Battle, Equilibrium, all of those are great cooldowns for keeping the warrior alive and still tanking. Meanwhile, Paladin's great because it has Hollowed Ground, Clemency for Panic, and Passage of Arms to help with raid-wide stuff, you know? But that's my opinions. Now you know how I feel about tanks. Thanks for hanging out, thanks for watching. If you want to support me, subscribe to the channel. And you really want to support me, go and watch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/ffxiv0955. I'll play this game over there. And yeah, that will be it. Thanks for watching, everybody.